Imagine waking up tomorrow only to find out that the year isn't actually 2026. Imagine that the calendar on your wall, the history books in your library, and the very timeline of human civilization have been fabricated. What if I told you that a massive chunk of our past, specifically the years between 614 and 911 AD, simply never happened? That Charlemagne, the great emperor of the Romans, was nothing more than a ghost, a legend created by a group of powerful men to rewrite the destiny of the world. This sounds like the plot of a high-budget sci-fi thriller, but for a group of serious researchers, this is a reality known as the phantom time hypothesis. We are taught to believe that history is a solid, unbreakable change of events. One king follows another, one empire falls and another rises. But when you look closely at the early Middle Ages, the links in that chain start to look incredibly thin. In fact, they look like they might not be there at all. If we look at the archaeological record from the 7th to the 10th centuries, there's a deafening silence. There are no grand buildings, no significant shifts in pottery styles, and a bizarre lack of coin circulation. It is as if human progress just hit a giant pause button for 3 centuries, and then suddenly resumed exactly where it left off. Think about the architecture of the world. In the year 600, we see the echoes of the Roman Empire with its massive stone structures and complex engineering. Then, supposedly 300 years later, in the year 900, we see the Romanesque style emerge. But here is the kicker. The architectural jump between 600 and 900 is almost non-existent. It's as if builders took a 300-year lunch break and returned to the job site the next day with the same tools and the same blueprints. In any other period of history, 3 centuries would bring massive evolution in technology and art. But here, nothing. It's a void. The man behind this mind-bending theory is Heribert Illig, a German historian who noticed a massive discrepancy in the calendar. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar because the old Julian calendar was drifting away from the solar year. The math was simple. The Julian calendar was off by 1 day every 128 years. By the time of the Reform in 1582, the calendar should have been off by 13 days, but the Pope only corrected it by 10 days. Why? Where did those other 3 days go? According to Illig, those 3 days represent roughly 297 years of history that were added to the timeline, years that never actually passed in the real world. Now, you might ask, why would anyone do this? Why would powerful leaders fake 3 centuries of time? To understand this, we have to look at the year 1000. In the medieval mind, the year 1000 was the ultimate symbol. It was the millennium of Christ, a time when the world was supposed to be perfect, and the emperor was supposed to be the representative of God on earth. The theory suggests that Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and perhaps the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII conspired to rewrite the books. They wanted to live in the year 1000 to solidify their divine right to rule. They created a fictional hero, Charlemagne, to bridge the gap between the ancient Roman past and their own manufactured present. If Charlemagne was real, why is his biography so filled with impossible feats? Why does the archaeological evidence for his massive palaces and legendary battles seem so elusive? In many ways, Charlemagne is the perfect mythical ruler. He is the glue that holds a non-existent era together. If you remove him and the 300 years surrounding him, the timeline of the Roman Empire connects almost perfectly with the late Middle Ages. The transition from late antiquity to the high medieval period suddenly makes sense. The Dark Ages were dark not because people were ignorant, but because there was no one there to turn on the lights. They simply didn't exist. Let's talk about the physical evidence, or rather the lack of it. When archaeologists dig into the earth, they expect to see layers. This is how we date civilizations. But in many parts of Europe, there's a strange jump in the soil. You find artifacts from the late Roman era, and then, right on top of them, you find artifacts from the 10th century. The layers that should contain the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries are often missing. How can 300 years of human life, death, waste, and construction leave so little trace in the very ground we walk on? This isn't just a European phenomenon. If the phantom time hypothesis is true, it would mean that the history of the entire world during this period is a fabrication. This includes the Tang dynasty in China and the early Islamic caliphates. Critics argue that it's impossible to fake history across multiple continents simultaneously, but proponents of the theory suggest that many of these regional histories were synchronized and rewritten later by scholars who were trying to make sense of a global timeline that was already broken. We see copy-paste patterns in history all the time. Rulers with identical names, identical battle strategies, and identical life paths occurring centuries apart. Are these coincidences, or are they the result of historians filling in a blank void with recycled stories? Skeptics point to astronomical events as proof. We have records of solar eclipses and comets from the 7th and 8th centuries. If these events happened and were recorded, then time must have passed. However, Illig and his supporters argue that these records could have been backdated. Ancient astronomers were capable of calculating when eclipses would have happened in the past, and scribes could have easily inserted these events into fictional chronicles to give them an air of legitimacy. In an era where very few people could read or write, the church and the state held a total monopoly on the truth. If they said it was the year 800, who were the peasants to argue? We live in a world where we trust the digital clock on our phones and the dates in our news feeds without a second thought. But our connection to the deep past is incredibly fragile. It relies on the honesty of a few monks in cold monasteries and the ego of emperors who wanted to be immortal. If we can't find the buildings, if the math of the calendar doesn't add up, and if the archaeology remains silent, we have to ask ourselves how much of what we know is fact and how much is a beautifully crafted lie. The missing 300 years isn't just a theory about numbers on a page. It's a reminder that history is not a static thing. It is a narrative, and narratives can be manipulated. Whether those 3 centuries were stolen by an ambitious pope or lost to a clerical error, the possibility that we are living in the year 1729 instead of 2026 is a haunting thought. It means our ancestors are closer to us than we think, and the shadows of the Roman Empire haven't quite faded yet. As we look at the ruins of our world, we have to wonder what else we've gotten wrong. Is time a straight line, or is it a tapestry that has been cut and sewn back together by those in power? The deeper we dig, the more we realize that the past is not a closed book. It's a mystery that is still being written. And sometimes, the most important chapters are the ones that were never written at all. Stay curious, keep questioning, and remember that the truth is often hidden in the gaps between the seconds. Because if 300 years can vanish without a trace, what else are we missing?